Okay, can I welcome everyone to the meeting? Phil, Mr. McCourt, should I say, you have some procedures that I think you go through at the start of each one of these Teams meetings. So would you just like to take us through the procedures, please?
Certainly, Chair. The first step is to do a roll call. If we vote or if members speak, they'll do so through the chat box on the side. That's the easiest, but there is also a hand that can be raised. We would remind members that if you do put anything in the chat box, it is public, so it will be seen and recorded. So we do ask that the debate remains oral amongst the committee, and if people can, when addressing the chair or there's a roll call for a vote, I would ask that you put your video on and then speak in that order. Otherwise, if members could turn their camera off, because that assists with the quality of the audio and visual seeing for people joining in. So if I can ask members to express themselves and turn their camera on. So Councillor Anderson.
Here.
Councillor Cannon.
Present.
Councillor Gardner.
Here.
Councillor Gilchrist.
Good evening, I'm present, thank you.
Councillor Karl Greaney.
Present, good evening.
Councillor Jeff Green, of course.
Yes, good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Hodson.
Present and correct.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Sullivan.
I can't see him on the right-hand side either.
No. Okay. Councillor Whittingham.
Stuart? Yep.
And Councillor Wood.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair. So if I could just remind members when you vote to turn the camera on so the public can see it's you, as it were.
Okay. I don't think we've had a vote, but it's a good, if we do get to one, which I doubt, but because we tend not to, but if we do, then I'm sure we'll issue separate instructions as we go through it as we go along. Is that okay?
Over to you,
Okay.
Chair.
All right then. So the first item is members' code of conduct declarations of interest, where I ask members to consider whether they have any disclosable pecuniary interests and or any other relevant interests in connection with any items on the agenda, and if so, to declare them and state the nature of the interest. Do we have... Yeah. Yes, Stuart.
Belt and braces, just declare personal interest as a member of the executive. I'll be approaching this meeting in a fair and open mind and independent force.
Good. Okay. Thank you for that, Stuart. That's duly noted. I think, is it Patrick? Yes. Anyway.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair.
Okay. Good. Okay. This is, I do have a very sad piece of business to conduct, which is to, I think all members and officers and so on will be aware that former councillor David Elderton, Alderman David Elderton, has passed away in very sad circumstances. David, as we all know, was a former member of this committee, and I would ask, and I think the way I'm going to do this is to ask everyone to take off the video and microphone, and just for a moment's silence to mark the passing of David, who was an outstanding member of the council, a great member of this committee, and on a personal level, a tremendous ward colleague. So I'd ask people to switch off the video and microphones for a short period. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, members. David Elderson, he will be sadly missed, I'm afraid. Okay, so the next item then is, if we go on to the business, is the annual governance statement, which I'm sure everyone has read from top to bottom, all however many sections and pages. And I think Ian Miles, I don't know whether Cher, you want to introduce it, or whether you want Ian Miles to thread. Maybe if we let Cher introduce it. Does it belong to Cher or to you, Phil?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it belongs to me.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, members. Good evening to this evening's committee. So this is the annual governance statement, which I will ask Ian to come in a second and just take you through. Because the last committee we had was in March of this year, and as a result of COVID, there has been some date changes that have been allowed in terms of presenting the annual governance statement and the annual statement of accounts, which is the next item on the agenda. The date changes are that normally the draft governance statement and the statement of accounts would be published by the 31st of May, and that the accounts will be audited and the final annual governance statement will be presented to the committee by the 31st of July. As a result of COVID, as I mentioned, these dates have been relaxed, and the new dates now are that the governance statement had to be published along with the accounts on the 30th of August, and the audited accounts and the final governance statement would come to the committee on the 30th of November. So the governance statement has been published alongside the accounts on the council's website, but we just thought it would be an opportunity, because the next committee is not until November, for members to have an update on what's included in the governance statement, and to ask any questions and be able to input any comments or feedback they might like to make to the SLT for the governance statement when it's presented to members as a final issue in November. So I will ask Ian.
Just before you do that, Cher, and sorry, with the David Elderson thing and what have you, it slipped my mind. Could I just beg the indulgence of the committee? You did mention about the two items. I had asked as a matter of urgency for lessons learned, and I've just, so we're clear, I mean, and we need to demonstrate a reason why that would be the case. So I just wanted to say, the committee originally had listed for this committee, and will again at some point, a report on lessons learned from COVID experience for the council, and in working with its partners at the LRF, NHS and government. Since then, it's become apparent to everyone that we're again seeing a rise in COVID-19 infections, certainly locally. And so it was agreed that the officers that would have pulled that report together needed to spend their time elsewhere in terms of managing the outbreak in Wirral. But nevertheless, the publication from central government of Dame Mary Nay's rapid stocktake of lessons learned from the Leicester City, Leicestershire experience of responding to a local surge in COVID-19 cases gives the opportunity for this committee to meet what, in my opinion, is an urgent need to satisfy itself on questions of assurance and risk management facing the council, as it now addresses this extra set of local restrictions and rise in infections. And I'm delighted to say that Elspeth Anwar, David Armstrong and Mark Camborne are ready just to take us through that report. It was published on the supplementary agenda. Apologies, I should have mentioned it at the very outset. Is the committee content that we take that item and we ask Elspeth, supported by David and Mark, just to take us through what we're doing? Adrian. I see your hand up, Adrian. Adrian Jones. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah, okay. Good.
Yes. Yes, I read the report. It was the Leicester report. It was extremely interesting, but it occurs to me that there isn't an awful lot we can do about it as a committee here, unless we cut across what the chief executive is doing. And I'm not sure about that, and I'd want some guidance from our lawyers. But it does seem to me that we might, for instance, refer or draw the Leicester report to the attention of the Chief Executive, who I'm sure would in any case be taking it on board to make sure that everything that he does is proper. Now, is it necessary for us as a committee to do anything separate from what the Chief Executive would be doing? I'm not sure that it is. And that's where I need some guidance.
Okay, Phil.
Chair,
I'm sorry, I meant Phil Gilchrist.
I do apologise.
Sorry, he had his hand up. I do apologise.
Question to me.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have had the advantage of being on other places where this has been discussed, and the issue that concerned all members was not diverting the energy of officers who are busy dealing with a developing situation and taking their time and energy away from their work. Whilst the report on Leicester I've read thoroughly and scribbled on it in many places, the Leicester matter took place some weeks ago at an early stage. My reading of that report and what I've been hearing in recent meetings is that those lessons have largely been taken on board. And I think the committee can look at it at a later stage without going into great detail tonight.
No, and I
go along with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would welcome though Elspeth as our consultant in public health, just giving us a degree of assurance, taking us through it briefly, and the assurance that we have learned those lessons, separate assurance, if you will. Sorry, Phil McCourt. I do apologise, Mr. McCourt.
So I was only addressing the question, Chair, because Councillor Jones said, is it proper to be on the agenda? And obviously it's your opinion that counts as to whether something is or isn't on the agenda as an urgent item. If you consider that it's urgent, then it is. So this is now on the agenda. It's simply a matter of whether you want to deal with it now or at the end of this evening, Chair.
Yeah, my intention would be to deal with it at the end of the evening, once we've done the other two items. So thanks, everyone. People content that we do that then? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Chair. Back to you then. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. I was just explaining the reasons for the report coming to the committee. As I say, just to reiterate, because the last committee we had was in March and the next one won't be till November. So we just thought it was beneficial to bring the annual governance statement and then second item, the annual statement of accounts, to the committee to give the committee an opportunity to have a look through those draft documents and to raise any questions and comments on those as well. So I'm just going to hand it over now to Ian Miles, who's the audit manager, and we'll take you through the annual governance statement. If I can just ask Ian to come in. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, as well. Yeah, it'd be nice. Thank you for the opportunity just to provide a brief overview of the contents of the AGS and the process as well. The format of the AGS changed last year to reflect some of the good practice suggestions from CIPFA. That seemed to be well received last year, so we followed a similar format this year. So I'll take you through the AGS with references to the slides, but also references to the page numbers in your agenda as well. So on slides 2 to 4, pages 6 to 8 of the agenda, you've got there an introduction and overview of the Council's governance framework.
Sorry, Ian, are you going to put those slides up as we go through them?
I was going to give you a brief overview of the whole AGS, and then if there's any particular ones that you'd like me to talk to, I can do that.
I think it would probably be useful, just in case people haven't been able to print it or can't manage the screen or the meeting and read them on the screen. If you are able to put the actual governance statement up, it would be helpful, I think.
Can you all see that?
Yeah, well, I can if I'm, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll thank you, Chair. So on slides 2 to 4 here, what you've got is an introduction and overview of the governance framework the Council has. From slide 5 onwards, page 9, what you've got here is we present the review of the effectiveness of the Council's governance framework. So what you have here is that for for slides 6 to 14, pages 10 to 18, it takes you through each of the 7 principles of the SIP for Solus framework for delivering good governance in local government. Now that's the framework which has been used for the Council's Code of Corporate Governance. And what you've got for each of these principles is a summary of some of the key elements of the governance arrangements which continue to operate. So it's not everything that's in the code, it's a sample. For some of them, you've got some of the improvements that have taken place in year. And then for some of the other, where applicable, for some of the principles, what you've also got is some of the, to just show the bottom of that slide, some of the ongoing initiatives, some of the areas where there's scope to further strengthen some of the arrangements. So particularly on pages 14, 15 and 17, there's a number of areas there where we talked about where arrangements can be strengthened. Now, in terms of what the process was, just to feedback where the AGS has been compiled from, meetings that we had with each of the directors back in February and March. We received governance assurance statements from each of the directors as well. We did a review of the findings from the internal audit work completed in the year, and also a review of some of the key areas that have been discussed at ARMC in the year. So, for example, on slide 13 on page 17 of your agenda, if I just move to that one, what you'll find here is reference there in terms of areas where governance arrangements can be strengthened further. That is picking up some of the areas, for example, ARMC have talked about in the year, such as procurement, such as IT, and such as compliance and risk. You recall that in the AGS, we include significant governance issues. Now, what you've got on pages 19 to 23 of your agenda, so starting here, is an update on the 5 significant governance issues that were included in last year's AGS. So the Ofsted Improvement Plan, the financial challenges that the council has to face, issues around the local plan, the planning issue, the growth company, and also following the serious tragic incident with the tree previously as well. On slide 20, what you've got here is a brief overview of the council's response, the impact of COVID-19 and the council's response on the effectiveness of the council's governance processes. Now, this is brief. It's based on some discussions with chief officers in July. The second to last paragraph in there, or the last paragraph, recognises that there is a process for reviewing and formally reporting the issues learned, and that is something which is being worked on at the moment, and that's something that will, I'm sure, come to the committee's attention subsequently. What you then have on slides 21 to 25, that's a definition there of the significant governance issues and what we've used to help consider what merits as a significant governance issue. And then from pages 26 to 29 of your agenda, these were what were deemed significant governance issues for the year ahead. So it identifies those issues, it identifies the action that's proposed as well. So clearly financial resilience is an ongoing issue from that point of view. The non-compliance significant governance issue is picking up the compliance issue, which the committee have very much flagged during the year, that's been added to the corporate risk register, number of areas that are included within that. The regeneration agenda, clearly of massive importance to the council. And then finally, the change in the political arrangements and obviously the significant impact that has on the council as well. So just to say finally that the AGS is something that is owned by SLT, so it's gone. The draft goes through the corporate governance group, it gets reported to SLT, it's signed off, owned by SLT, and then it's signed by the chief exec and the leader. So my role is very much trying to collate those responses and to help prepare that draft based on the views of SLT as agreed by SLT.
Ian, thank you. Thank you for being so brief and such a full overview. Question I have, which I didn't see from a brief reading of the document and the briefings I've received on it, was one of the areas that the committee has been quite interested in, and certainly I was working with our risk manager, was business continuity planning. Now, I'm sure none of us would have expected a pandemic and the impact that had had. But certainly my sense was that early on when we'd asked, and I do apologise, but when our risk manager had written to officers asking for their business continuity plans, I think the response that she received was 20%, less than that. And we had to, with a degree of force behind, Audit and Risk Management Committee, blah, 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 heavy-handedly ask officers to take this issue seriously, a bit like we did on the procurement issue. Sadly, I don't think, I know everyone's been busy, but there hasn't been much of a response. It remains a real area of concern. I would imagine, given what everyone's been facing, that there will be an increased emphasis on business continuity planning. But I didn't see that in the document anywhere. So what's the situation on that then? Do we mark that up as something that we were concerned about last year, or do we mark it up as something that we, if we as a committee agree that is something that the council needs to look at in the next year to make sure that we do have continuity plans, and that when services have to stop, we have plans in place to cover that.
I think it was a good point that you raised at the briefing last week, Chair. It would sit, I would have thought, very well with the compliance issue. Now, the wording for the compliance issue in the AGS very much reflects what was in the corporate risk for compliance. But I would imagine that the business continuity issue is probably another corporate issue that could be usefully included within that wider compliance issue. That's something that we can always, with subject to share, we could always report back to SLT to perhaps include within that compliance issue.
It would be, I'll let Chair speak for herself, but it is a sort of indication of culture, isn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong, I've actually, been in a situation where I've had to do business continuity plans, and they're a real pain, but they are, and we do have someone in place now who I think is excellent and would give some support. David Armstrong has indicated. David.
Just very quickly, Chair, just to say that obviously we have existing business continuity plans in place. They have been used through the initial stages of the COVID crisis. We will review them in the light of experience that we've learned from that so far. So they are in place. They will be reviewed, and they will take account of the fairly unique circumstances we've found ourselves in recent months.
I'm sure that's the case. The problem was, David, when our risk manager asked for them, lots of officers didn't bother replying with them, and I think that's where Ian is coming from with the compliance issue. It was something that our risk manager asked for, and the vast majority had thought they had other things to do, really, because it wasn't an issue. I think that's.
I remember it well, Councillor Green. You gave me a bad time over it, so I gave other people a bad time. We did end up with a full set, quite rightly. You gave me a bad time, so we did have a full set. As you say, it did in some areas take some putting together, but they are there and they will be subject to review, because clearly they've been put to a different type of test, and a very strenuous test, and it is part of the plan to review them all and work on it. And I think if anything positive has come out of this, it has demonstrated to all the workforce and all the managers that those plans had to be in place.
Okay, Chair, you've indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on what David had said there, and Ian as well, and your comment about that. As you say, Helen has been appointed. She's the business continuity and risk manager. I think it probably is. It would be perhaps beneficial to, as Ian recommends, to include it in the compliance area, but put it as a separate line. I know Helen is working on this, and she is doing a session with our corporate management team. There is a corporate management team meeting tomorrow. I don't know if she's doing it to tomorrow's or whether it's next month, but where she's gathering all the heads of service together to kind of emphasise the importance of the business continuity plans and the importance to make sure that they are robust and sufficient, and that she can get them in and have a look at them. So I think from that perspective, it probably would be beneficial to include it as a line in the compliance part in the AGS.
Okay, thank you for that. Are people content then that we include that in we include business continuity planning in the compliance element of the AGS? Looks like we are. Yeah, go on, Andrew. No. Okay, I think we are. Has anyone got any other points or questions they want to ask Ian on the AGS? Notwithstanding it belongs to the corporate management team, but we've been asked to comment. Phil, you've indicated. Phil Gilchrist, that is. Sorry, Mr. McCall.
I think that the issue that's concerning us all most is financial resilience. And to refer the page numbering in the light blue tab at the top of the page, it does talk on page 21 onwards about financial resilience. And I think during the next year, our audit committee, assuming that the membership is appropriate, will be able to ask about some of the procedures in place. The document refers to a 6-weekly financial monitoring and challenge group, which I think it would be helpful to hear more about. I appreciate our officers are probably desperately trying to keep on top of all the issues that face us, especially the new gaps growing in the budget, but it would be helpful to understand what role we will play during the next remainder of this municipal year in establishing how these things are working.
Yeah, and in terms of, as Cher comes back to respond on that, which I'm sure she will, what's being done to improve financial reporting? Because if we're going to, I know there's the strategic long-term elements that we need to think about, but there's also the short-term management of accounts and knowing where we are. And I think one of the points that we've made over the year was that the month-end reporting was incredibly slow. So I don't know whether you want to pick up Phil's question and my little adjunct to it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, can do. So just specifically on the point that Councillor Gilchrist raised, which was the Financial Monitoring and Challenge Group, this group was set up when we established our financial sustainability programme. So the last year we kind of recognised that the budget decisions were going to be getting tougher. So we set up a brand new programme of financial sustainability, which the LGA were happy to kind of come and have a look at for us as well and validate that. The Financial Management Monitoring and Challenge Group was to ensure that the savings proposal that people or directors were submitting for the what year are you in? The 2021 budget, which is what we're in now, that any pressures were being brought forward, that they were robust, and that they were withstanding challenge. Any savings proposals were put forward were achievable and deliverable. This group did meet. Unfortunately, as a result of COVID, there was a bit of a pause in this programme going forward. However, this group is actually meeting on a weekly basis now, and has been probably for the past maybe 6 weeks, just because of the financial situation the council is in for the next financial year and this financial year. So we have enforced some more robust arrangements, and this group's meeting on a weekly basis to make sure that monitoring is being undertaken and the challenge is there and savings proposals are coming through. So we have, as I say, we have made those arrangements a bit more robust. Just in terms of the reporting for next year and the budget process, We do know it's going to be tough to balance the budget, and also in terms of decisions that need to be brought forward for next year, for 21-22. We have got a new process in place for that, which will be presented to Policy and Resources Committee on the 7th of October. But I think the role for the committee, I would welcome some scrutiny from the committee on this, and to provide some assurance to residents really, and to other members, that what we're doing is robust, and that the assurance can be given that we have got a good programme in place of longer or medium and longer term financial sustainability, to make sure that the council can be financially sustainable, or we can do as much as we can to ensure that the council is on a bit of a sure footing and can be sustainable. So I definitely welcome the support from the committee to have that assurance, and to look over those arrangements following the next committee, or the one after that.
Yeah, I would get quite twitchy when someone says scrutiny, because, well, we don't have executive and scrutiny anymore. Phil, Mr. McCourt, that is, in terms of reference, our role in being the critical friend to share, do we have a role in that, in terms of receiving the quarterly updates and so on and so forth about spend, overspend, etc., etc.?
Yes, Chair. Your terms of reference are full and helpful in the way that Chair put them across, both in terms of the potential for audit issues, but also in terms of that risk management of what's happening with the budget and where the council is going.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Thank you. Phil Gilchrist, are you content with Chair's response that we don't need to recommend, add or anything to the report, but we know that that the mechanism Chair is putting in place is supporting us in terms of the financial resilience plan that's there, notwithstanding that there's the bleed over risk of the new committee system and so on and so forth. But
yes, I'm grateful for the assurances that have been given. We did hear earlier in the year about how difficult it was reconciling ledgers with ancient Oracle systems and the like, but I'm hopeful that some of those issues are being corrected, so that the getting hold of management information in a timely way for us is being addressed, and so we can see what's happening, or not quite in real time, but close enough for us to understand what's going on. I am heartened that the meetings have moved from 6 weekly to weekly, which should give an indication of the seriousness with which we're facing issues over the next few months.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair to our external auditors, I think it's been in the last few annual reports about the sustainability of the budget and the excessive use of one-offs and so on and so forth. So I'd be interested to hear from our external auditors if they believe that notwithstanding it's been a difficult year, which I'm sure it is, but the actions that are in that report are consistent with what they would expect to see in terms of shares, because again, Share produced the financial sustainability strategy a little while ago. And so the actions that we've put in there and are taking in governance terms are adequate and sufficient. Well, they appear adequate and sufficient. I know you'll only know when you get to the end of the year, but if the external auditors could give us a view.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we take a great deal of note of your financial sustainability, as we do, as we do with all councils. I suppose it's the financial situation's changed, both for yourself and others with COVID. And I know we'd looked at financial sustainability last year, and we could see that you were putting in the savings plans that you needed to deliver. Obviously, the share in the Q1 report has highlighted that those plans haven't fully delivered. So, and that's understandable given what's happened with COVID. But so you know, having spoken to Cheryl last week, I can see that there are further plans going to go into place to make sure that you do deliver. Financial sustainability remains a risk to you. So while I can see the plans in place, I still think there's probably more that you'll need to do to ensure that you're financially sustainable over the long term.
Okay. Shah, give you an opportunity to close this out.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree. Yes, and look forward to working closely with Mark and Grant Thornton really in kind of reviewing that and having that assurance from the committee as well in terms of whether they think that those reports will be sufficient or whether there's anything else the committee would like us to pick up in terms of what we can do for that. So happy to do that, no problem.
Okay, well, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that as a committee, we've uniformly supported you in terms of your discussions you have, let's call it like that, discussions you'll have with spending chief officers, no doubt, and also the work that's going on the ERP in terms of getting some systems that will support you in those conversations and the work of the finance partners, business partners, etc. So I'm sure as a committee we will continue to support you in terms of carrying through on the financial sustainability strategy. And again, Mark, if there's anything that you feel from best practice around and about, and I know this is a very strange year, let's make that clear. We all understand that. But again, I'm sure if there's any best practice that you've seen as you go about your work or Grant Thornton have seen, I'm sure we would all welcome that and an opportunity to have a look at it to see how applicable it would be. Adrian, did I see that you were trying to say something?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I'm generally willing to, but don't tempt me when I'm not ready.
Okay, all right. Okay, committee, are we content with the commentary that I'm sure has been picked up by somebody, whether Patrick or Phil or Shah or Ian? Are we content to note? Do we note that, Phil, or do we don't have to approve it because it doesn't belong to us, does it? But do we note it and thank the officers for their work on it?
You note it, Chair.
Okay. All right. In that case, are we content to note the report, everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
I certainly am.
Yep. Kate? Oh, no, yeah, everyone's okay. Yeah. All right. So I think in those circumstances, I'm prepared to say it's duly noted. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ian, for your hard work, and thank you to the people that prepared their various statements and so on. And we look forward to the little amends that we've put forward being attached to the document. So thank you for that. That takes us to the next item, which is our annual accounts. And I know this is something everyone's looking forward to, a very short, easily digestible and understandable document. But Di Grisdale is with us, and I know because she spent 5 minutes taking me through a Ready Reckoner earlier on, that she's going to make it all really easy and understandable for non-accountants. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Di Grisdale. I joined the Council in March. I am the Finance Manager for Strategy, Policy and Financial Accounts. So thank you for having me tonight. Just a small little intro. Obviously, this is the unaudited accounts, as Chair mentioned before. These are being brought to the committee this evening, not as a statutory requirement, but just to allow the committee to note, review, comment and ask questions prior to the financial accounts being brought in November once they've been audited by Grant Thornton. We published the accounts at the end of August. This year you notice that the annual governance statement and the accounts have been separated. I hope this helps in trying to time to digest them, also add equal weighting of the importance of each of those documents. Included in the draft accounts are the council's accounts, the collection fund and the Merseyside pension fund draft accounts, as we are the administering body for the fund. I think you'll appreciate, as the Chair has alluded to, the accounts are rather large. So what I'm planning on doing, if it's okay with everybody, is to go through 3 of the primary statements in a very summarised table. So I was hoping, Patrick, is it possible you could put the table for me so I can just talk to some of my notes as well at the same time?
Yes, Di, I'm just about to try and take control and share that document.
Thank you very much. As Patrick's putting the table up, please don't wait for me to finish because this may go on a little bit longer than we expect. So please interrupt and ask questions as we go along. I'll welcome that.
Careful what you wish for, Di. There we are. That is the black hole that is our account. Is that right?
Yeah. When the table does appear, I'll just talk while Patrick's getting the table up. It's a summary of the 3 primary statements, and what I've attempted to do here is try and bring the 3 statements together and try and relate them to the outturn report that went to committee in July. So what I'm trying to do is tell the story of the whole picture rather than keep them as sort of isolated reports for everybody.
Can I, before you do that, Di, can I just ask if anyone has the skills? How do we make that? Can we make that full page somehow? How would you make that full screen? Patrick, do you know how we do that?
If I can help, Jeff, there is an easy way to do it.
Go on.
Just have your main computer open next to this one and draw it all up on your main computer, which is much bigger.
Yeah, I'm on my main computer though.
I mean,
Chair,
yeah, go on, Bryn. Is that you, Bryn?
No, Stuart.
I'm Stuart, sorry.
Yeah, on the ribbon, the toolbar at the top.
Yeah.
Just to the right of sensitivity, there's a little upwards arrow. The little upwards pointer. If you just click on that, it'll close the ribbon and just make it a little bit bigger.
All right, the one I've got just says share content. But anyway, go on. Go on. Keep going, Di. Okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So this table, say, brings together the balance sheet, the comprehensive income statement, and what's called the movement in reserve statement, and it shows how the relationship of that to the outturn that was went to committee to cabinet in July. The values I'm going to talk about are quite large. Obviously, I'm talking millions, but what I kind of asked the committee to do is think about materiality means to them, as often myself and the external auditors will be making reference to large items, key qualitative matters, when in fact we probably want to discuss areas that you wish to discuss rather than I want to bring to your attention.
Okay.
So the table is split into 4 columns. The first column is the general fund, then we've got the usable and the unusable columns, and then the total. So just as a bit of background and knowledge, the general fund and the usable reserves are often referred to as a single usable reserve reference. The bottom half of the table then shows the movement in the balance sheet, which by talking through hopefully the movements in the usable and unusable reserves, I will demonstrate how those have created movements within the balance sheet. They're not all I'm not going to talk about them all, but hopefully I'll talk about the key ones for us. So just the usable reserves, these are funds that have either been set aside from previous budgets to help fund services in the future, to mitigate risks, and also to reduce taxation. They include the earmarked reserves, and these are set aside for specific purposes. So if we go to look at page 102, note 9 of the accounts, you'll actually see a detail of what those earmarked reserves are made up of. And then we have what we call the general fund, which obviously, as the name implies, it is very much general fund that we can use to draw down on in future years or grow, hopefully, in future years. We've then got the unusable reserves, and as the name suggests on these are not usable for general taxation purposes. These are set aside mainly for statutory adjustments and to reflect timing differences. So within that, you'll have things like the revaluation reserve, which shows gains from revaluations of property, plant and equipment. They can only be recognised on disposal of those assets. We have the pension reserve, which obviously you'll notice in the balance sheet is rather a large figure. And that recognises the timing differences from post-employment benefits through to how the funding of those benefits throughout the years. So in summary, this table really shows that we had a general fund position. If I go to first column, and if you look, I think, on row 24, it's showing that we had a balanced outturn position, which we reported to members, which balanced outturn basically means that the budget that we set and the funding that we had, we actually managed to achieve that budget and that target. Okay.
And the 10 million in usable reserves in bracket, red and in brackets, Di.
So red is good. Red is a credit. So that means we have £10.7 million of general fund reserves. So we had 10.7 at the beginning of the year, and because we've got a balanced budget, then we've still got 10.7 at the end of this financial year, 31st of March 20.
Good. Okay. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Okay. So what you might ask yourself is, if I was looking at this table, was, okay, so you're telling me we've got a balanced outturn, but actually you're telling me that on row 15, surplus and deficit, we were actually in deficit of 55.8 million, but then you come down to a balanced budget. So why is that? And simple terms, that is because of all the statutory adjustments that we have to do. So those statutory adjustments are made up of things that are not allowed to affect council tax. So under SIPFA code, we have to remove them and we have to put them within a unusable reserve, a reserve that we can't touch because it manages timing differences, or until we actually realise the disposal of items, you can't actually recognise those within the accounts. Some of the other big items is the pension fund under the IS 19. Then we've got smaller items in there, such as leave accruals, and then revaluation reserves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Di, and again, thank you for heroically trying to draw this together. One of the questions I asked at briefing was around assets and depreciation. So we've identified an increase in assets, I think, haven't we? But some of those we don't have to depreciate. But then I went on to mention capital expenditure. Now, my understanding with capital expenditure, at some point, and I don't know whether you've put that in, if you have, you could tell me where it is. Two things. First of all, we'll have to pay the interest on that capital expenditure. I'm presuming that comes out of, the general fund. And secondly, if we are creating assets, so we're borrowing significant amounts of money to create assets, when they become, we might not have to pay depreciation as we are spending the money, the capital program, but at the point at which the capital spend becomes an asset, don't we then have to depreciate it? And doesn't that go directly come directly out of the money that we think we're raising from the council taxpayer to pay for services, basically?
Yeah, so Chair, so the depreciation is a statutory adjustment for public sector services. Mm-hmm. And that gets replaced by what we call a minimum revenue provision. So that is the actual charge, and that, you're right, that does actually go through and hit the general fund.
But and where would is that on that table that you produced there, which has disappeared off my screen, by the way? I don't know if that's...
Okay, so that's going to be within, so it's not in your net cost of services, Chair, on row 8. It is actually within the row, it will be within rows 9, 10 and 11.
Right. Can you just...
So I broke those rows out to make sure to demonstrate the debits, the charges and the credits as in income that we're receiving, because if you remember, Chair, they were one single line.
Yeah. And does that... I can't see where the depreciation... Oh, sorry, what's in the revenue provision figure appears. Am I just missing something?
No, it's within those figures, Chair. It doesn't stand out on its own.
Oh, it's just netted off, is it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we can't actually see the level of depreciation that we're paying. And has some modelling been done in terms of, as the capital expenditure and the assets crystallise, what the increase is going back to the sustainability question, what the impact that's going to have on our general fund?
Yeah. So after our meeting last week, Chair, I did go back to our colleagues in Treasury, and they will be providing a document to yourselves and the committee that shows that the timing difference between depreciation and the actual charge of the provision.
Right.
For you. So we don't look at asset by asset, we look at the overall borrowing and the capital programme and the assets that we've got. So it's not broken down as an individual item by item basis.
Okay. And have we put the interest that where does the interest we're currently paying on our capital programme, does that appear here?
That is, so that's on, if you can see on row 10, interest payable, and it's within note 11 of the accounts, Chair. So it makes up part of that £26.3 million.
Right. And that's part of the expenditure. So of our 296 million that we need, 26, part of that, what we're paying is our interest, and that appears in the 26.3. Is that right?
That's right, Chair, yes.
Okay. And is that programmed to, again, sustainability, is that programmed to increase, or is it going to stay level, or what?
I would need to go back and ask my colleagues in Treasury, Chair.
Okay, all right. And I mean, it's a bit unfair because we're just talking about last year's account. I can see certainly two hands up. Councillor Gilchrist, you've got your hand up, and I need to also put the list on to see who the other hand is. Yeah, it's Andrew. Okay, so Phil, you first, and then Andrew.
I think last year I spent some time exploring the delights of the minimum revenue provision, and I think in order to help this year's budget, some use was made of it, or shall I say, perhaps technically some rephasing of it. When I looked at the accounts, I know there's 100 odd pages, but if you ask it to search for the words minimum revenue provision, there's actually very little in the narrative about our use of it. And I thought perhaps if we are in a position to comment on these accounts, we might highlight there should be a bit more explanation of its use in any narrative that's produced.
It might help the non-accountants amongst us, Di. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chair. We can add that in for the final account. The idea of the account is to actually inform the reader, and they need to be suitable for technical accountants and non-technical people to read and understand.
Yeah, I'm guessing they have to be developed to a set formula by somebody that says you mention this and you don't mention that, and all the rest of it as well, do they?
Yeah, but I think they've got to be user-friendly, and they've got to be, you've got to be able to, as they use the word, tell a story. And if Councillor Gilchrist feels they're not telling that story, then we will go away and have a look at that by all means.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you for that. Andrew.
Oh, thank you, Chair.
So let's get the video on. Thanks for this sheet, guys. It's really good. Just at line 7, operating expenditure. I think it should be other operating expenditure rather than the notes. So note 10 says that of this sum here of 71 million, approximately 39 million is levies. Could you give us some detail on what the levies includes? And the other 30 million is a disposal of 2 secondary schools. And I just wonder whether or how disposal of assets comes into operating expenditure. I can see that we've effectively given them away to academy status, but that would seem like a write-down of assets more than operating expenditure. So just a bit of clarity on those 2 points. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Gardner. If I can come to the second point first, so we are required to actually report the disposal of academies or transfer academy schools to academies within that reporting line. It is directed under the CIPFA code for us. So if you want, I can quite happily go away and evidence that for you. With regard to the levies, I will have to take that query away.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I wasn't asking for evidence. It's just a matter of, it just doesn't seem to me like expenditure. I can see that it's a loss. It's a negative on the balance sheet, but I can't see why it's expenditure. That was my question, really.
Right. So
perhaps you could forward with the CIPFA details on that to the committee. Maybe that would be useful, so we all know why that is.
Yeah, absolutely, could do that. Certainly,
Okay.
certainly, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Shah, Andrew, if you take your hand down, that'll help an old man like me not get too confused. And Shah, you've got some information on the levies, would be my guess, but.
I have, Chair. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that's made up of, I think it's made up of 2 levies. So there's the Mersey Travel Levy, which is around about 20 million. I think it's just over 20 million. And it's also the Waste Development Fund Levy as well, which is around about 15 million. So that's those 2 made up of those.
But on those, don't we basically levy in our council tax demand for those separately? So the money comes in and it goes straight out again, doesn't it? Is that a straight in and out thing in the accounts?
Yeah, it's part of our budget. So there will be contributions from council tax and business rates and government grant funding to support the whole budget. So we don't identify the funding to the expenditure specifically, but yes, we do pay those straight out to Mersey Travel and to Mersey Waste Development Authority. So we don't have any influence over those.
And that's the difference between a levy and a precept. So the police and the fire preceptors, don't they? So they raise their own money in effect.
They do, yes, that's right, yes.
We tax people for Mersey Travel and Waste, don't we? I think that's broadly it.
Yes, it's part of our expenditure budget, yes, so we have to pay that out to them, yeah. Yeah, okay. All right. Again, this has been a really heroic effort to try and get us to understand 100-page documents. So thank you, Di. It has led to a lot of very useful questions. So thank you for that. Anything else from colleagues? I can't see any other hands up. I might be missing it. Is there anyone who has a question to Di or share on the accounts at this stage? I know you've got to take them away, work on them, and the auditors have got to have a look at them and all that sort of thing. But I was conscious last year, so thank you for this, Chair, because last year we didn't see them till very late, did we, as I recall? And it got all a bit odd with timetabling of meetings and this, that, and the rest of it. So thank you for that. I suppose a good question would be to ask our external auditors when they're likely to have signed them off or completed their audit work, because I would imagine this is a big piece of work. And I also understand, Mark, from the audit world, that Mark, the other Mark, sends me emails on. Haven't the auditors said no more Mr. Nice Guy or something? You're all going to be very
very firm with local authorities on their accounts or something. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know.
Uh,
We try and be fair, so we're only firm when necessary. So I think all we've said on accounts in general is that we have to comply with with international standards of auditing, and you have to comply with accounting standards. I suppose there's a reality that the Financial Reporting Council, who regulate us, they've got very high expectations of both councils and auditors. So in terms of of what we do, and they're excuse me, they're particularly focused on going concern, and how the financial I suppose sustainability of councils, particularly given the impact of COVID. So there are areas that we that we'll explore with Diane and share as we go through the audit, but we'll try and keep as much balance as we can with that. In terms of deadlines, the deadlines changed to the 30th of November, just because it's taking councils longer to prepare their accounts, and it's taking us longer to get through them. I think that's perfectly sensible, given everything that's going on in the world and the impacts on COVID. So as we sit here today, I'm confident that we should be able to get your accounts signed off by the 30th of November. That obviously depends on illness and gosh knows what in terms of delivery. I think there is an earlier audit committee date, Chair, than that, and while we'll try and get the accounts audited for that time, I have to say there's a significant doubt in my mind as to whether we will achieve that. But obviously we'll keep conversations going with the council and get your accounts audited and signed off as soon as we can.
Okay, that's good to know. No, I did see something, I'm sure I did, that said that that external auditors had been asked to be more challenging of local authorities and their accounts and budgets and so on and so forth.
That will be from the FRC, and obviously there's the councillors may be aware that the Redmond review came out sort of last week, which sort of reports on the sustainability of local audits, but yes, there's audit rigor is only going one way, so you're perfectly right.
Okay, well, that's all anyone ever has to say to me, Mark. Many officers will attest.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, perhaps Phil, Cher, Mark, and I could liaise in terms of the meeting day, because if we've got to sign them off, which I think fundamentally we have or something, we don't want all that mucking about with meetings and half this and half that and all the rest of it. So it might well be whoever's on the audit committee next year wants to think about the most appropriate date to get this piece of business in, rather than calling everyone back. Is that possible, Mr. McCourt?
There's currently a calendar of meetings.
The 14th
but
of November.
Given your notes now, then that could go forward. I mean, you could approve the accounts now, subject to comment, or something like that. That would perhaps save that.
But do we not have to sign off the audited accounts, though? I think.
Yes. So you are. Have that delegated authority from full council, so you will need to meet to finally sign off the accounts. You may need
I just wondered whether
skip any interim measures.
Okay, maybe we can. I'm sure members would love to have another 2 meetings, but if we could do it in one, that would probably be better. And maybe we can just have a think about, or whoever's member of the committee could have a think about that going forward, perhaps. Okay, but thank you for that. Any other colleagues got any questions on the document that Diane you're indicating again?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just before, if there's any AOB, we'd like to ask Naomi from the Grant Thornton to talk about the Redmond review findings, if that's possible.
Would you like to do it now?
Yeah.
Sorry, would you like us to ask her to do it now?
I don't mind, Chair. Whenever suitable this evening.
Oh, right, okay. Well, let's do this then. Let's do what we've been advised. Yeah, you can have a bit of video as well. Let's do this then. Are the committee content for us to approve those accounts subject to the comments from various members of the committee? Is the committee content for us to do that at this stage? Notwithstanding, we will get the report back sometime in November, and we'll still get to sign off the audited accounts. Phil, I think you're...
Yes, thank you, Chair. If it's possible for the notes on the amendments to be circulated to members, we could at least read them and then comment usefully on whether those notes reflect what we had raised, and that might speed up the process.
Absolutely. And I think one of the good systems that we have in place now on a regular basis is a briefing for spokespeople. Oh, hello, someone's breathing hard there. So we do have briefings in place for spokespersons and so on, and maybe I'm sure Di would love to do this anyway, as the accounts are being brought together and the various comments that have been made, you could update us on those and how they're being responded to, Diane. Would that seem reasonable?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. On that, and we didn't even mention how the COVID money is being budgeted, because we did get some last year, didn't we? Will that all be covered in next year's accounts, or is any of it covered in this year's accounts?
No, Chair, it's all in the 21.
Okay, good.
2021 accounts, Chair. So we had 25 million we received in March, which is sitting in a reserve in the accounts. So within note 9, you'll be able to see that.
Okay, lovely. But it will actually, so it's in a reserve, but how it gets spent will all appear next year, yeah? Okay. So are people, is the committee content to approve the statement of accounts subject to the notes that have been raised and the ongoing, and as they're subsequently prepared, that be dealt with by spokespersons, and that we receive at some point an appropriate point the audited accounts? Are people content with that as an approach? Do we need to vote on that, Phil, or Mr. McCourt, that is, or are we prepared to accept that by acclamation?
That's something you can deal with by assent, Chair.
Okay. So does anyone not?
Acclamation from me.
Yeah, I assent to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Agree.
Everyone assenting away that? Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you. Yep. That looks like we've got complete assent. So thank you very much, everybody. If it's possible, sorry, what was the lady's name? Di?
Naomi.
Naomi. If it's possible for Naomi to, I'm conscious that someone has a birthday party that they have to get to, and I promised we'd be finished in under 2 hours. So if it's possible for Naomi to give us a 5-10 minutes update on the Redmond report, would that be possible, Mark, Naomi?
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry. Yes, it's going to be me rather than Naomi. So, because I'm perhaps a little bit closer to it than Naomi. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops. Promise. I will go through at speed, and you may have questions at the end. So the Redmond review looked at the I suppose the sustainability of local authority audit. In particular, its theme was around accountability and transparency. So it's been quite interesting listening to you work through the accounts, and I have to say I was genuinely impressed by the rigour with which you tried to understand what was quite a difficult set of accounts to understand. So Redmond's looked at that and looked at sort of all aspects of public sector reporting or local authority reporting. His conclusion is that reform is quite urgent. So there does need to be change, both from auditors and councils, but from the regime in itself. So it's quite a it's quite a hard-hitting report in terms of him not accepting the status quo and asking for change. And he's already started to engage with the NEO and MHCLG. I think he's been engaging with LGA and with PSAA as well. So, there's quite a lot of stakeholders involved. But, I think there's a stark reality that he thinks there should be significant change. So reforms for auditors. So his recommendations are multifaceted, I suppose. He's very clear that the 31st of July deadline is not sustainable. It needs to go back to September. But he also sort of says, audit firms need to be properly investing in training and the experience of their people, and and making sure that we're working better with other inspectorates. I suppose his final point on reforms for audit providers, he concludes that audit fees are underpriced by circa 25%, and he's saying he views that as a very serious issue and questions whether there will be a market in the future if there isn't action taken on the pricing, as well as some of the other issues I've just gone through. For councils, he's very clear that audit should be higher profile in councils. And the auditors, as well as going to audit committees, should be addressing full councils each year just to talk through their findings and giving a review. He talks about a proficiency review for Section 151 officers, something that I've never seen before. But he also talks around accounting arrangements need improving, the quality of financial statements need improving, and there needs to be sort of more rigour in terms of how the accounts are together. And he's also recommending that there's an annual formal meeting between the three statutory officers, Chief Exec, Director of Finance and the Monitoring Officer and the Auditor, just to raise the profile of audit. So it's quite vivid in terms of what he's asking for. And he's also really clear that more needs to be invested in audit committee members so that they can sort of apply even greater rigour to the process, and there is a call for independent members to sit on all audit committees as well. The final area is around reform to the regime, and I suppose the biggest change is that he's asked for a formal system leader, and he's called it the catchy title of Office for Local Audit and Regulation, which abbreviates to OLAR, and that body would be responsible for the I suppose the oversight and regulation of audit and holding people to account. Would be take over the responsibilities of the NEO, of PSAA, of the FRC and the ICAW, because there are quite a lot of players. He's very clear. He's very clear that this isn't a reinvention of the audit committee, and the body would be only 5% of the size of the audit commission, and so it would have very strict roles and responsibilities. He would have a stakeholder committee that it was responsible for reporting to, and that would include the likes of MHCLG and the Financial Reporting Council, ICAW, SIPFA, LGA and so on. There's a cast of thousands that would sit on the stakeholder committee. And then he's also talking about the accounts changing, as I said, but talking around a set of summary accounts being prepared, which should help the user sort of understand where local authorities are, much, you know, because as you've shown earlier, they're quite complex. And he recommends that there should be changes to the CITFA code to allow that and to make sure that the code's focused on areas that are meaningful to local decision making and members and the public. So that's it. It's quite. I've gone through it at pace, so so we can all go home. But it's quite a hard hitting review, Chair. I have to say. As a supplier, we are really supportive. The fees need to change. That's what it is. But there needs to be reform of this if it's going to get better and if it's going to be more useful. So yes, that is the Redmond review, a riveting read.
And thank you for reading it for us. Di,
You're welcome.
You asked for that. Is there anything you want to add? I mean, all I would say is you've clearly, already taken on board the idea of more openness and transparency around our accounts in terms of the way you've engaged with people on the committee and also the way you've presented that summary sheet tonight. Is there something you'd like to comment on?
No, Chair. I iterate Mark's comments really. I think it's welcomed, and if it helps inform people better, then I think everybody will just welcome that.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you for suggesting we hear a bit about it. It was very interesting. With so many hard-hitting recommendations, I can only imagine how long it's going to take to be brought in. And with all those initials that have to be spoken to and consulted, good luck with that. I've actually seen, it's the only group of people I've seen that get, almost physically violent is accountants when they're talking about the scheme of accounts and all the rest of it. They, who'd have thought, Who'd have thought how passionate you accountants can be? Phil, you've indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm probably a bit long in the tooth. A couple of years ago, probably a decade ago, we used to have competing bids from auditing companies to do work for us. Then I think, putting it simply, the scheme was nationalised into some process, which I'd have to look up, where auditors were effectively selected for us by some process or a more modest process. What I'm interested in, and no offence to anyone, is what auditors will actually do for the 150 odd thousand it is we might pay now with the extra 25%. We're supposed to be improving our accounting systems so that all the sort of double checking and cross checking and going through things in the past, there isn't as much need for it because it's now much better organised technically. So I think when the time comes, we would need to find out what the actual process will be for selecting auditors in future as well.
I'm going to try and avoid us going down that particular at the moment because, a bit like you, Phil, I've been around long enough. We have the, audit commission and they, red, amber and green and all that malarkey and so on and so forth. And then, then it wasn't going to be like that. Then it sort of is a bit like that and so on and so on. So I'm sufficiently long in the tooth to await developments and to look forward to all those accountants and auditors having great fun in their meetings as they seek consensus and that the LGA seeks consensus on auditors' fees. Adrian, you've shown yourself. Is there something you wish to say? A very impressive bookcase, by the way. I've got bookcase envy. Is there anything have you shown yourself for a purpose? If you have, you need to put your microphone on. You're on mute at the moment. You're on mute, Adrian? No, you're still on mute. To to keep my promise, I'm going to move along, if that's okay. Thank you again, Mark and Di, for those reports and for everyone's contributions. I think they've been really interesting. Probably means I need to get out more, but I found them very interesting. So the next item I've got is our item of AOB share. And I think you said that Elspeth, David and Mark, and I've seen various people joining the meeting as we've gone along. I don't know whether Elspeth is in, but just to talk us through the item of AOB, which was the lessons learned from Leicester and Leicestershire, and giving the committee some assurance that we've read it, we understand it, and we're applying any lesson that we possibly can to keep our people safe. Chair, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just David Armstrong is going to come and just introduce this report. David's been heavily involved in our COVID response as an authority, so he's just going to come and introduce it, and then he will bring Elspeth in just to talk through some of the items in the report. So if we can just hand straight over to David, Chair, if that's okay. Thank you, David.
That's fine. David, I've promised somebody that we'll take no more than 2 hours. I don't know, we're going to get more detail as we go through. So thank you very much for coming, and yeah, away you go.
Really quickly, Chair. I mean, first of all, I think...
No, you don't have to be quick.
It's solitary sitting here because when you last met on the 10th of March, there'd been no deaths on Wirral due to this vicious virus. And as we sit here, we've had 439 Wirral citizens lost to this virus. So I can assure you, including one member of our own staff, Stuart, from our transport section. So I can give you the assurance at the outset that this report and the whole issue of the COVID is being taken very seriously, and the preservation of life and the protection of vulnerable children remain the Council's priorities. I'm really grateful for Elspeth coming along tonight. I think this will be a first for Elspeth at Audit. Elspeth is a senior officer in the public health team. She works directly to the Director of Public Health, Julie Webster, and she's one of the team who've been working pretty much round the clock for the last, or for most of this year since the Wuhan evacuees arrived, to try and do our very best to support Wirral citizens with the COVID. I think in terms of the report, I can give you the assurance that when it was received by the Chief Exec, it was immediately read and it was disseminated through the organisation to everyone who would find it useful and helpful in their work, and it was discussed at the senior leadership team. It is an interesting read. I think and Elspeth will take you through some of the key points. I think there are some caveats. First of all, although it covers August, which you'd think was only yesterday, the world has moved on very significantly nationally and locally since then. The report talks about turbulence tactfully between national and local, and it talks about difficulties and lack of clarity and understanding. Clearly, this was the first area in the country to be locked down in this way following the full lockdown. And since then, a great deal of work and a great deal of clarification has come forward. So particularly, it's in 3 sections, particularly in the first section, the governance section. As I say, although it's only August, things are very different now. They've moved on dramatically, really. In terms of the context, they had some things to grapple with that we don't, because there was a city council, part of a county council, and 3 borough councils who all had to come together and work collectively. And again, and also a much bigger population. Leicester itself is bigger than Wirral, 350,000 residents, and obviously a different kind of geography as well, and a different kind of urban environment. So within those contexts, it is an interesting read. It has proved valuable to us. We have worked through it. We've used it as a checklist against where we are. I think of more value in terms of the future will be the fuller report, which is coming later in the year. But as I say, we have put it to good use, and it is in 3 main sections. And Elspeth will take us through it. Thank you.
And as Elspeth takes us through it, can I just comment? One of the things I was keen to do, and when we started talking about this, it was again back in August, and the world has moved on. Although I think everyone anticipated, because people have been saying there was likely to be a second wave. I think I just wanted, and I thought the committee should receive assurance that we had actually and I'm sure we would have done, but the assurance that we had undertaken a lessons learned, things like the MRFS or whatever it is, the resilience, the Merseyside-wide group working had reached the stage that it needed to be at, and so on, and testing and what have you. So conscious there'd been a huge amount of work, didn't want to stop anyone from getting on with it, but I just thought we as a committee should get some assurance that A, we have done a lessons learned and we were going to be better placed to deal with the second wave as it came along. So thank you, and I'm sure you will pass on all our thanks for the work that people have been doing. I think we all know how hard people are working to protect life, really, and the way that you've done the key priorities for the council. So thank you for that.
Just before Elspeth comes in, the one thing I would say is, I think it didn't feel like it at the time, but I think taking the British citizens evacuated from Wuhan and then the cruise ship passengers who'd been evacuated actually served as a very helpful start, because it means we've actually been involved in COVID ahead of all the other authorities starting in January. And I think we learned some really good lessons there about working with the hospital and about setting up dedicated teams within the council, cross-departmental teams. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, although it didn't feel like it at the time, I think that proved very helpful to us when actually the main event came along as well. I think in terms of where we are, it feels like a roller coaster ride. There are some lessons we've learned in the early days which won't form part of the future, you know, sourcing PPE and things like that, and setting up the food system, which are now in place and could be used again. But actually they're less of an issue because new issues come along all the time. The issue in the last couple of weeks has been getting more testing into the borough and helping to support the partners who are coming in to do that testing. So yeah, I can give you that assurance, Councillor Green, that we are taking lessons learned as they go along. It'll be different lessons at different phases, I think, as this disease progresses through to hopefully a successful vaccine stage.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Elspeth, away you go. And thank you for coming along. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Green, and hi everyone. So as David said, my name's Elspeth Anwar. I'm a public health consultant. So I work for Wirral Council and I report to Julie Webster as the Director of Public Health. So I think, you know, thanks for that excellent introduction, David. Definitely feels like a roller coaster. I would second that. And yeah, absolutely. I think our Wuhan experience put us in really good stead to start this off as a system response, because if we're going to protect the people of Wirral, it's what we're doing as a council, isn't it? But what we're all doing together. So just to pull out a few of the key learning points. So just the first, as David said, it's in 3 sections. So the first bit about governance. I think we've really progressed our local governance arrangements, and I know Councillor Gilchrist is on the call, and we have our local outbreak control board now, which is currently meeting weekly now because we've stepped it back up to give us that political oversight of all our activity. You mentioned the MRF as well, and we are heavily engaged and involved in our Merseyside Resilience Forum. I think there's been a lot of work done and learning about how local areas engage with the Merseyside level, and obviously with our most recent lockdown we are doing that on a Merseyside footprint, so a lot of that work will go on at that Merseyside level. We've also as a council, I think, really got in a position where we can remobilise things when we need to in terms of governance. So people may be aware that Paul Sator has made the decision to step back up our SCG and TCG rhythm. Not that it really went away, we just, you know, but to meet more frequently because of the increased cases we've seen.
Sorry, Anwar, and I know because everyone's working so hard to get used to these initials. Could you
sorry. Yeah. Strategic Command Group, so that's like our local gold command, and our tactical command group, which is the way that we then make the things that Strategic Command want to happen. So they are now meeting on a more frequent basis locally, as well as on the Merseyside level. I think it's just to give you the assurance that we have that local grip as well as the Merseyside grip, and we're not relying on the Merseyside Resilience Forum to do everything for us. One of the key points was about kind of learning from local outbreak scenarios. So again, in terms of both at a Merseyside level, there is outbreak planning going on, and at a local level through our emergency planning procedures, we're planning scenarios and stress testing ourselves so that we're making sure we are prepared. We've mentioned testing. And one of the key things in the report was about testing and our local intelligence and data that we can get through. So as David said, this report was written in August, but yeah, things have moved on, and we are continually pushing for better access to intelligence around COVID in terms of cases, contact tracing, and testing. The more local control we can get, I think, in terms of that, the better. We are getting more granular data through, but there are still things like occupation and other aspects that are missing sometimes from that case data. So we keep pushing for that locally. There's a key point in here about councils working with their local communities, and the second theme is really around community and business engagement. And I think that's something that we do very well in Wirral. So I know Mark is on the call and he might come in after I've finished maybe to add about the work of the humanitarian cell, which again has never stepped down, is still there and is still working, that really leads and coordinates that effort in terms of community engagement and coordination. Just so people are aware as well, we've got the community connectors and the Mersey Fire and Rescue Service who are now going out to our local communities with where we can use our intelligence in terms of where our cases are in Wirral, and they're going out there and there are boots on the ground and they're door knocking and they're getting the information out to our communities that need it. We've also launched the Community Champions programme, which is again our way of ensuring that the right information can get through to the right people in our communities. As well as the community engagement, we've really engaged with our business sector, especially through the chamber, and we've got business support packs, very significant engagement effort from trading standards and environmental health out there, again, boots on the ground, engaging with local businesses to ensure they can be COVID secure. I think and David touched upon this, one of the recommendations was about recognising, I think, that the ability of councils local knowledge and councils can deploy at pace and from across the organisation. So that's something we've definitely done in terms of our response and utilising kind of people who aren't delivering services for different things to support our outbreak control response. And I think finally, the final point would be about, it talks about scope for local systems to take on more. And I've already touched upon this, but particularly contact tracing and that side of things. So that is something we definitely want to do with the right support and financial backing, again, from local government. And we are developing a local contact tracing team to get to the people that the national system is not capturing through the national test and trace system. So I'll pause there. I don't know if Mark wants to come in with anything. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour in terms of the recommendations and the key points that we've pulled out. Appreciating, as David said, it's a point-in-time report, and that there is ongoing learning that we are pulling out as we respond to this crisis and event.
Can I ask, Elspeth, that was there anything in the report and the experience of Leicester and Leicestershire that that you thought, oh gosh, yeah, we need to cover that off, we need to make sure we're doing it? Or are you pretty confident that by whatever means, our regular review, and I think in the medical profession, sort of reviewing what you've done is, it's part of the culture in those terms. So I'm fairly sure that you'll have been doing a lot of that, particularly where care homes are concerned and stuff. So was there anything in that report that you thought, that's something we hadn't thought of? Or as you've checked the list, you've been pretty confident we've covered off each of the learning points from Leicestershire, from their first lockdown?
I think we're pretty confident we've covered all the points. I think what the Leicestershire experience really emphasised, and what we're focused on in Wirral, is that getting the messages across in a way that could be understood and in an understandable way to both our communities and our local businesses and those sectors, because I think it's, and we're experiencing this, aren't we? There is confusing messages around, and maybe mixed messages about, and they definitely experienced that in Leicester. So I think if anything, the Leicester learning reinforces that we're taking the right approach in terms of that proactive engagement approach that we're trying to take, so that we can translate the sometimes confusing messages that come out in a way that our communities and business sector can understand. And it kind of validated the effort that we're putting into that. And as I said, we're calling it the boots on the ground approach, you know, getting out there, getting those messages out to our communities, because that in Leicester is what they found, you know, made the difference, particularly for those. I mean, they had a lot of BAME community there, a Black, Asian, minority ethnic community that were particularly affected in Leicester. We obviously have a smaller community here in Wirral, but we're still doing lots of proactive outreach work with those communities as well. So I think my short answer would be it reinforced that we're taking the right approach in terms of that, trying to be proactive and engage with communities.
Excellent, thanks. That's lovely. Mark, you're going to add a little bit for us?
Yeah, good evening, councillors. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just by exception, really. I know we're here to talk about the Leicester report, but I wanted to assure members here that learning from all over the country takes place all the time. So we had a meeting tonight with our legal representatives, with all the other 5 districts, the police, to look at how about enforcement. I know that's been on the concerns of many elected members who've been in touch with me and other officers about how the new guidance and new legislation is going to be enforced. So the MRF has set up an enforcement cell. The Chief Executive, Paul Zator, chairs that cell. I support him on that. This is to make sure that we have consistent approaches across Merseyside in terms of that element of managing the COVID risk. In terms of the humanitarian cell, just to support what Elspeth said, really, we still meet twice a week. Over 50 voluntary and faith sector groups sit on that. The messages we've had back on the reflection that will be in the report later in the year, as they've never seen the council to be so open and transparent and engaging in terms of dealing with a crisis which affects us all. I've really valued chairing that group with them because they've been absolutely fantastic in both their response and ideas. So we're learning all the time, and we continue to learn about the information that comes through. It's an iterative process as we go through our outbreak plan. Elspeth will tell you that. We meet regularly, challenging ourselves about how we're doing everything correctly and as much as we can do to make sure we support the vulnerable and manage the risk or stop the spread of COVID. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark, Elspeth and David. Has any colleague got any question that they would like to put based on the report? I see Kate and Jill have got their hands up, so I'll go with Kate first, if that's okay. Kate, after you.
Thank you. And thank you for that update. I think my question really was a little bit more about our local track and trace, because it's become very apparent that the national system isn't working as effectively. And obviously we know that we know our own people best. So I think I was just after a little bit more information about how we're managing that on the ground and how we're going to take that forward, especially at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I can come in and answer that one. Yeah, so we obviously got some test and trace funding as a council as part of developing our local outbreak plan. We've used that to develop what we called our Wirral Outbreak Hub, which is really our way that we are supporting, preventing, controlling and managing cases and preventing outbreaks and managing outbreaks across different settings in Wirral. As part of that hub development, we are developing a local contact tracing offer, in that recognition that the national system is not capturing everybody and is not perhaps as timely as we would also like it to be in terms of capturing that. We're just currently in the process of working out and through how we can best do that, linking in with the national system so that we don't duplicate our effort and call people who've already been effectively called by the national system. But that should be in place very soon locally to supplement that system. And I think that really gives us, yeah, as you said, a better understanding of cases and contacts locally. And that, again, enables us to do that more proactive work that we want to do.
That's great, thank you very much.
So the other thing we've done is to hang on to as much testing and bring as much testing in as we can. The Chief Exec made representations to the Department of Health in the early days that the nearest regional centre at Haydock was problematic to get to from a peninsula where straight line distances and straight line travel isn't possible. And we did eventually secure the satellite centre at Bidston, which we still have, and we've just extended that now indefinitely. It can handle up to 400 tests a day, and we've worked with the contractor Mighty, who's on a government contract, to set up other testing centres in Birkenhead, Bebington and Liscard, and we're also continuing to try and secure mobile testing. So we have a capacity of over 1,000 tests a day at the moment, and it could be ramped up further. So that also is a positive position in order to get as much testing as possible on the peninsula.
Yeah, and just to say with that access to testing, sorry, it was, yeah, I just was looking at some figures today, and we've got the highest rate of testing in Cheshire and Merseyside. So even despite those access issues, our rates are better than other local authorities for getting access to testing for our local people.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that one of the things that impressed me the most during this was that we were, the MRF had said they were going to have their testing facility in Haydock, and I think the chief exec and others responded very quickly to that, and the amount of testing that we have available is tremendous, and everyone involved in that is to be thanked and congratulated for getting that much testing. The one thing that I'm a bit concerned about, I suppose, is the whole business of people who don't need a test going and trying to get a test. Do you know what I mean? So we don't have universal testing at the moment. Would that we, could get to the moon and all that. But at the moment, as my understanding, it is still the case that if you have symptoms, then you would go and get a test. I think there's a number of people who are hearing, someone down at a local pub has had COVID. Someone lets them know, crikey, I'm going to go and get a test. You know what I mean? As opposed to waiting to see if they're symptomatic and so on and so forth. And then blocking up the system, blah, 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 and so it goes. So I think that messaging is kind of really, really important, and anything we can do to get that out, and I can see that we're trying, is pretty important. Is that fair, Elspeth, or is that me just misunderstanding stuff?
No, that's absolutely fair. I think the testing is most effective when you're symptomatic, and symptomatic people need to be prioritised for testing. I think we're trying locally as hard as we can to push those messages. I mean, obviously there's anxiety, isn't there, when people are informed that they're a contact of a case, and it's understandable that people may want to get a test. I suppose the other message that we're trying to push is actually, if you're a contact, it doesn't matter if you have a test and it's negative, because you still have to self-isolate for those 14 days, and because that's the incubation period that you could be kind of harbouring COVID and potentially infectious with COVID. So yeah, even if you get a negative test as a contact, the advice is still to self-isolate. So yeah, we're trying to push that message. It's locally. I suppose the other point is that we don't have much control locally on access to testing, apart from at the satellite testing centre, where we have a local booking system. The rest of our testing sites are booked through the national gov.uk website. So we have limited ways of prioritising local people for testing, but we do that in the bit that we can, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
that makes
I'm
sense.
conscious. I know of somebody, for instance, who couldn't get a test on the national thing, but went on the Wirral website and utilised the Wirral website and got one. I shouldn't really say this because everyone will now try and do it, I suppose, but they because their child was symptomatic. It wasn't, so yeah, okay. Good stuff. I've seen a few hands go up. Jill was the first. Jill.
Hi, thank you for presenting that, and I know what wonderful work you've all been doing, and it's been unprecedented times over these past few months. My concern is that and I hope you don't mind me broadening it, it's with regard to as we go into those winter months and other things kicking in, furlough scheme coming to an end, with regard to the bailiffs can now go in to remove people from their homes if they haven't paid their rent, but also as we enter the winter phase, is that seasonal flu and colds, and also people are going to be needing more electricity, more heat, and it's just I'm worried about aspects of fuel poverty, and it's just kind of like, are we building in scenarios potentially looking at, do we know how many people may lose their homes, maybe evicted? Do we know anything with regard to the fuel poverty aspect? It's kind of a lot in there, but it's just that winter scenario, because it's just going to be so different if we are facing the same levels of the disease as we have through the summer, through its spring and summer, that we will in the winter. So I'm just wondering what's been built in there. Thank you.
Probably best if I come in there as well. I think you are right. The winter months are going to present additional challenges, not only for us but for the health service, because at the start of the outbreak, clearly the hospital was focused on COVID to a very high degree and had a spare capacity in the hospital. It's now following national guidance to do some business as usual work as well. So therefore, it is running up to capacity, and that's why even modest numbers. I think it's 30. Patients currently with COVID in our park, even modest rises create additional challenges. So there are challenges. Again, we are responding to national government initiatives. We were notified yesterday about the scheme which will make payments to people who have to self-isolate and who don't have the means to do that financially. And we will have that set up by the end of the week to administer that from the start date next Monday. So there are avenues coming in. We do have some other support systems in place as well that we can use. So we will maximise any opportunities that are provided to us to support families and to support people who find themselves in challenging circumstances, which indeed is what we've done. And Mark's work, you know, we distributed nearly 18,000 food parcels to people and provided energy cards and so on to a large number of people as well. So we will carry on doing everything we can with the resources we've got to support families in what are very challenging times for them.
And Chair, just to support what David said, we've invested some of that COVID money in some of our third sector organisations, such as Wirral Food Banks, ready to make sure that both this and potentially if Brexit causes us issues, that we've got capacity within that system to be able to support families in crisis as we go forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add very briefly, that there's lots of planning as a system again going on about flu vaccination to ensure we can try and maximise flu vaccine uptake for our population. Obviously, we'll have to think of perhaps new and perhaps innovative ways of doing that locally as well, because of the challenges that COVID present. But that planning is going on, so just for the assurance around that too.
That's great. I know when I tried to get hold of Jill, if you want to come back.
No, I just want to say thank you. I'm sure it was. It's just that concern. It's sort of weighing heavy, and some of the casework and some of the calls I'm taking. It's just that, and when people have been asking, when am I getting my flu jab? What's happening? I mean, whether they've got children in year 7 or there's just lots in there, and I know that it's just going to be another busy period for you, and there will be an alteration and a difference to it. So thank you anyway for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know when I tried to get hold of a GP the other day, I've spent quarter of an hour on listening to the message about how I had to do everything online and so on and so forth. And I'm presuming we are providing support to those residents that might not be as capable of booking everything online as some of our GPs would like us to be. What I'm intending to do, because a few hands have gone up, I'm going to ask Stuart next, then Adrian, and Phil. I don't know what he's going to say, but he is on the outbreak board, so I might ask Phil to sum up from his point of view. Because Jill, your hand's still up, but I think I believe you've had your go. So, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Just very quickly, I think as a committee, I think we should go on record on congratulating and thanking everyone involved for a superb response, to this terrible pandemic. I've obviously been sitting on the cabinet and I've sat in the various meetings. I think the response has been outstanding in the face of obviously confusing messages and what have you. And I certainly believe that had the local authorities not taken the action we had done, and potentially the virus would have hit us even harder than it already has done. In terms of testing, I don't accept for 1 minute that the lack of testing is down to too many people accessing the test. It's not rocket science to realise, you send the kids back to school, people going back to work, that there's going to be an increased demand for tests. So no, I certainly think that should be factored in to central planning. Personally, I prefer all testing and tracing to be done at local level. I think local teams are much more competent and much more tuned into the local communities to be able to carry out the work in an acceptable manner and more effectively. But I think as a committee we should go on record to thank the sterling work that's been done. Thanks, Chair. That's me done.
Yeah, no, that's fair comment. And yes, and we will, I'm sure, when we get through this meeting, this item, by the way. Yeah, and I'm sure we would all agree, because we're local politicians, and I think we've often seen the blunt instrument of central government when it tries to come in and do things. It isn't as agile or as knowledgeable about what's going on locally as, the people actually on the ground. And I think that's a fairly uniform message, and something that came out of the lessons learned report, which is what we're dealing with at the moment. Adrian.
Well, thank you, Chair. First, I think I'd like to thank David and Elspeth and Mark for the way in which they've explained things to us. It's really good to listen to our professional officers giving us the stories from their point of view. I had it in mind to offer a proposition. It's quite possible that Phil will as well, but I'll say what I was going to say. I'd like to record that we are confident in our professional officers' leadership of Wirral's COVID-19 safeguarding plans, and that we note Jeff's helpfully drawing Dame Mary's Leicester report to our attention. I'd like that, or some form of words, simply to record the appreciation we have for our officers. Now, it could be that Phil Gilchrist, might already have something similar, but I would like it something to be recorded.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, Adrian, and we'll certainly try and make sure we build in that wording. Phil.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wouldn't demur from anything that Adrian has just said. I was listening to Councillor Gillian Wood's contribution just before, when she had outlined all the things that were going on. And if I was to choose the phrase for that, she described this perfect storm that we're now facing. In response to that, David outlined our very quick response to the offer of financial help, which has come from the government to those who were initially offered the insulting amount of £13 a day. And the key is, as Elspeth explained earlier, the message about getting people to self-isolate when they've been contacted. And the key is getting them contacted. And that's why when people give me figures about the substantial sums given to certain national companies, then I begin to think, is that money being spent effectively, efficiently, as we would expect it to be seen as local members? Certainly 6 months ago, when we were first invited as councillors to join with our officers and get a weekly briefing on what was going on and what was being done, nobody could have envisaged the sheer pressure on all our officers and staff in the health service that occurred in April and May. And whilst we've had some respite because of the summer weather, it's clear to all elected members and those who are following these things closely, and those of us who are following some of the ideas that people have that it's all some strange put-up job by some agency, the fact is that on the ground, our staff are working their socks off and working around the clock to make sure that Wirral's challenge is effective to what we're being told. And on those grounds, I entirely endorse what Adrian has said, and I think the committee should put on record its best thanks to the work of all those officers, and officers both within Wirral and other agencies who have a rising to meet the challenge that we face. And we earnestly hope that in the coming months all our preparatory work will prove to have been wise. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thanks everyone. I can't see any other hands up. Phil's still got his hand up. Is there anybody that would like to say anything at this stage? Okay, can I then, thank everyone for their contribution. As Adrian has pointed out, and Stuart indeed, I do think we should put on record our what's the right word? Our, not pleasure so much, but reassurance that all the lessons that have been learned from around the country and from the previous work that we've done has indeed been implemented, and we are learning those lessons and implementing as we go. So I think we should be reassured and assured by that and the great work that's being done. And then also, as Adrian has put on record, our thanks to everyone involved in the work, and particularly, everyone and as well, the people that have been leading this work and the people that have been doing it all, but have also had to do a lot of thinking out of the strategy and what we need to do and what we need to do next. So I'm sure that Patrick and Mr. McCourt, between them, will come up with will distill the essence of what we've all said to make sure our thanks go to the appropriate people for the incredible amount of work that's been done, and we wish you every success in the lessons that have been learned and how they get implemented going forward, and the many additional lessons that will no doubt be done. And anything any of us can do in helping with the communication of what we need to do and what the public need to do in terms of self-isolating and how they can get, if that's going to impact them financially, where they can receive this assistance from the council and from the government and so on and so forth, we will just let us know, and I'm sure you'll find us very willing and able and capable of helping you in that work. Elspeth, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, notwithstanding all those thanks that have come from everybody from right across the committee for the excellent work that's being done?
No, just thanks for the thanks. I think, Councillor Green, it's very much appreciated. Yeah, to get that recognition of the hard work, and I'll pass that on because obviously, you know, myself, Mark, and David are here, but it's a whole council system effort. So I'll definitely pass on that thanks from this committee as well.
Okay, thank you. And I do remember, you mentioned David, I do remember the article that appeared in the paper when David went to when the first people came back from China. Actually, you went along and provided some toys for the kids and some clothing and so on and so forth. And I don't think Wirral has had its approach from the very outset has been exemplary. So thank you, and thank you also for those little pieces of kindness that I know everyone involved in the system will have delivered that might not get picked up around and about the place. But I know everyone has made huge sacrifices to try and keep our people safe. So thank you very much for that. I think with that, I think we should close the meeting. David, you're flashing on my screen. Is there something you wanted to say?
Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to do that. No, just I didn't do the work. I didn't do the work for the Wuhan people, apart from being sent to Knutsford to get an engagement ring. Great credit to other people. I think that the plea is we've adopted a very simple slogan, which is keep Wirral well. And if we just make a plea to people to keep socially distancing, keep wearing face coverings where you should, and also keep washing your hands. The geography should help us in some ways. We're a peninsula, and we're dealing with one hospital. We're a unitary authority. We're not trying to deal with district councils and so on. So we have some advantages here. We just need to maximise them really. So it's just that plea really that people carry on doing those basic things and we get the rate back down again, because we do need to get it back down again. When you look how quickly it rocketed last time, we really do need to get the rate down again. It's 108 per 100,000 today, I think. Clearly it's rising in other authorities around us, but we do have to do everything we can to get it down, and it does need everybody to do that. And a great credit to other people that we haven't mentioned, 90% attendance in schools at the moment, so that there are other very positive features that we can hopefully maximise if we just stick to those 3 basic rules. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's a great point to end. I know we've got some items, so we have a meeting in November. If any colleague has any item that they would particularly like putting on that agenda, can you share it with I think with Cher, really. She's the officer responsible for the committee, I understand. So if you can share that with Cher, and we can have a look to see how we, or whoever replaces us, can look to see how we develop the next agenda. So thank you very much. I think this is the last, this will now be, who thought in March, eh? This will be the last committee of this municipal year, or municipal year and a half. Membership will undoubtedly change going forward post the annual council. Can I place on record my thanks to everyone who's served on the committee over the last 18 months or so. The spokesman, the vice chairman, the work that everyone has done. I think it's been incredibly collaborative. I think the behaviours have been exemplary in terms of being a critical friend to the authority and to support work that's being done in terms of the whole environment, the audit environment, and also the control environment and risk. And I think we've done some great work in each one of those areas. So thank all members and of course all the officers that have supported us. We certainly couldn't do it without the support and cooperation and transparency, I would like to say, of the officers in telling us how it is and helping us then support the council from that increased knowledge. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure serving with every one of you, and wish you well for the next municipal year. Thank you very much. Okay, and with that, oh, Jill.
No, I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you very much.
I think you've got somewhere to be, haven't you, Jill? Nearly met my commitment here, didn't I? So, right, thank you very much, everyone.